My son sent me a text message at 11:42 p.m. It was incredibly brief and deeply cutting. Don't come over to our house anymore. We want peace. I sat quietly in the dark, staring at the glowing screen of my phone, then glanced over at the checkbook, resting neatly on my desk. They wanted peace. I accepted that peace in silence. I didn't call him back. I didn't argue. I simply turned off the lights and went to sleep. But the very next morning, that exact same son showed up at my front door with a transmission repair bill in his hand. He assumed I was an ATM with a heartbeat. He had forgotten that I am also a structural engineer, the man who single-handedly built the solid foundation he was standing on. And when you are the one who builds the foundation, you also have the full authority to tear it down. Before I tell you the details of how I evicted my own son from his perfect life, let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. And hit that subscribe button if you believe that respect must always be a two-way street. Please note, this is a fictional story inspired by real-life family conflicts, designed to give you a profound perspective on the boundaries of love, the value of money, and self-respect. Now, let's get started. I am Douglas Carter, 68 years old. For 40 years of my life, I was a professional structural engineer. My job was calculating loads, analyzing stress points, and predicting the breaking point of materials. I designed bridges capable of withstanding devastating tropical storms and skyscrapers that could remain standing after severe earthquakes. I always prided myself on having a keen eye, able to see through to every hidden weakness inside a massive structure. But ironically, I failed miserably to see the structural cracks spreading right inside my own home, until the entire roof started crashing down on my head. It was a Tuesday evening in late autumn. My house was quiet, that heavy silence that often surrounds a man living alone after losing his wife. I was down in the garage, the space filled with the smell of sawdust and varnish. I was building a solid oak bookshelf by hand for my grandson, Leo. The boy had just turned 7, deeply passionate about dinosaurs and science books. I was meticulously sanding down a rough edge of the wood, smiling as I pictured his beaming face when he saw the gift. Suddenly, the phone resting on my workbench vibrated violently. A text message from Brandon. My only son. Dad, Brittany and I have discussed this thoroughly. You come over to our house way too much. We feel incredibly suffocated. We need our own space to be a real nuclear family without you prying. Don't come over anymore unless you are explicitly invited. We want peace. I read it, then I read it a second time, and a third. My blood ran cold as I stood rooted to the spot in the chilly garage, my hands still gripping the sandpaper. I recalled the last time I visited them, just 2 days ago. I had brought along a bag of organic apples because I knew my daughter-in-law, Brittany, liked cold-pressed juice. I had grabbed a wrench and fixed the leaky faucet under their kitchen sink myself, because Brandon didn't know how to use basic mechanical tools. I had sat on the rug playing Legos with Leo for 20 minutes before quietly leaving, so I wouldn't interrupt their dinner. I didn't think I was prying. I just thought I was being a father, a grandfather. But in their eyes, my presence was an annoyance. I carefully set the sandpaper down. I walked into the kitchen, flipped on a dim yellow light, and looked up at the wall calendar. Tomorrow was the 15th of the month. The 15th was always an expensive day for me. That was the day my bank automatically transferred the tuition for Leo's prestigious private school. That was the day I signed the check to pay the mortgage for the spacious 4-bedroom house where Brandon and Brittany lived. Legally, that house was owned by the Carter Family Trust, which I controlled, but they always called it their house. As for me, I seemed to be nothing more than a ghost who doubled as the bill payer. I picked up my phone, my hands didn't shake. I typed 2 brief words, understood. I hit send, walked upstairs, and turned off the lights. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, analyzing the load-bearing walls and the relationship between me and my son. And I realized the bitter truth, that there was nothing left supporting that distorted relationship anymore, except the money coming out of my pocket. The next morning, the sun rose just like any other day. I brewed a strong pot of black coffee. At 7:15, an urgent, impatient knocking echoed from the front door. I opened the door. It was Brandon. He looked tense, wearing the expensive navy blue suit I had put on my own credit card for his promotion interview 2 years ago. He looked nothing like a man who had just sent a text message abandoning his own father merely 8 hours prior. "Morning, Dad," he said rapidly, casually squeezing past me into the house. "You got coffee?" "I'm running late for work." He opened the kitchen cabinet, grabbed a ceramic mug, and poured himself some coffee. He acted as smoothly as if that cruel text from last night never existed in this world. He took a sip and grimaced. "You really need to buy better coffee beans. This pre-roasted grocery store stuff is awful." I stood with my arms crossed, leaning against the marble counter. I stayed silent, searching for an apology, a hint of embarrassment, or at least an apprehensive glance. But there was nothing. He dug into his coat pocket and pulled out a piece of paper folded in quarters. "Oh, about the text last night," he said with a frighteningly nonchalant attitude. "Don't overreact. Brittany's just been stressed lately with some social networking stuff. We just needed to establish some clearer boundaries. I was a guest in the very house I was breaking my back to pay off, where my grandson slept every night." "I understand boundaries," I replied calmly. "Good." Brandon flattened the paper out on the kitchen counter. "Anyway, the timing is a bit bad, but the SUV's transmission is acting up. I took it to the mechanic yesterday. They said they won't release the car until the bill is paid in full. And my credit cards are maxed out from the resort vacation last week." He pushed the black-inked invoice toward me. The number sitting at the bottom corner was $2,400. "Take care of this for me, would you? I have an incredibly important meeting at 9 this morning. You just sign the check, and I'll swing by the shop to pick up the car on my way to the office." He wasn't asking me. He was giving an order. I walked slowly over to the drawer, pulled it open, and took out my checkbook. For the past 32 years, I had tirelessly smoothed over every pothole on my son's path in life. I had always assumed I was helping him move forward faster. But I was dead wrong. I wasn't helping him. I was crippling him, turning him into an entitled freeloader living off the sacrifices of others. Brandon let out a sigh of relief, loosening his tie. "Thanks, Dad, you're a lifesaver. We'll bring Leo over to visit you in the next few weeks. Maybe when things settle down." The next few weeks, maybe. I picked up my fountain pen. I wrote the date. I filled in the auto shop's name. I carefully wrote out the amount of $2,400, and I signed my name. I tore the check from the binding with a crisp rip. Brandon immediately held his hand out, turning his body toward the door, ready to run. Great, I gotta run. But I didn't hand the check to him. I held onto it tightly, looking up straight into my son's eyes. "You said you wanted peace, Brandon." He scowled, looking impatient. "Yeah, Dad, I know. We just need some space. Hand it over." I smiled. It was not the warm or forgiving smile of a gentle father. It was the cold smirk of a structural engineer who had just pinpointed the exact source of a collapse. "Peace always comes at a steep price, son." I enunciated every word, lowering my volume but speaking with an unmistakable weight. With two decisive, calm movements, I ripped the $2,400 check right down the middle. Then I stacked the halves and tore it once more. Brandon stood frozen, his hand locked in mid-air. The shredded pieces of the blue check fluttered down onto the tiled kitchen floor, just like dead leaves. "Dad," he breathed in horror, staring wide-eyed at the scraps of paper. "What the hell are you doing?" "I am respecting your boundaries." I fired back, my voice devoid of a single ounce of emotion. "You want independence, you want space. I am granting you all of that right at this very second. Are you out of your mind?" He screamed, his face red with rage, slamming his bag down on the chair. "I need my car. I have an important meeting with a client." "That sounds like a problem for the owner of that car. From here on out, you are going to be the one paying out of pocket to fix your own transmission." "You are punishing me," he hissed, pointing his finger straight at my face. "Just over a private text message, you are pulling a cheap stunt like this." "I am not punishing you," I said firmly, swatting his finger away. "I am just retiring. I am officially retiring from my 32-year job of being your zero-interest bank. Get the hell out of my house right now, Brandon." He stared at me, his chest heaving. He was used to me caving in. He had never seen this look in my eyes before. "Fine," he sneered bitterly, picking up his bag. "Go ahead and be a bitter old man. You are never going to see Leo again until you crawl over and beg my wife and me for forgiveness." He spun on his heel, stomping his feet as he walked away, and slammed the front door behind him with such force that the picture frames hanging in the hallway rattled. I stood alone in the middle of the kitchen, The familiar silence returned, but this time, it brought a feeling of profound cleanliness and purity, much like the moment the dust settles after a controlled demolition of a rotting building. I didn't panic. I didn't shed a tear. I picked up the landline phone and dialed straight to Sylvia Ross, my longtime trust attorney. "Sylvia," I spoke up the moment she answered, "I need an emergency appointment at your office today. Clear your schedule. I need to make some sweeping changes to the family trust regarding the Oak Creek property." A long silence stretched over the other end of the line. Sylvia knew me far too well. "Are you sure, Doug?" she asked cautiously. "Once we set this chain of events into motion, there is no going back." I looked down at the shredded pieces of the check scattered on the floor. "I am absolutely certain. They asked for peace and quiet, so I am going to give them a war they can never afford to fight." About 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Sylvia in her upscale office, located at the top of a skyscraper in downtown Seattle. She was the one who had single-handedly set up the Carter Family Trust 10 years ago, and she knew every nook and cranny of the assets I owned. I placed the shredded pieces of the check onto her oak desk. "I want to trigger Clause 14B, I declared. Sylvia paused, looking up at me over her glasses. "Clause 14B, she repeated, her tone filled with astonishment. "That grants the trustee absolute power to strip away all privileges from the beneficiaries, if their behavior is deemed detrimental to the trust. Pulling this lever, Doug, that is a direct declaration of war. They were the ones who fired the first shot," I said. "Pull up my file. I want to go over every single dime I have thrown at Brandon and Brittany over the last 5 years. Sylvia clattered away on her keyboard, and then swiveled her tablet screen toward me. "These numbers are incredibly ugly, Doug," she sighed. "It wasn't just the monthly mortgage payments. It was also the local property taxes, the flood insurance, the HOA fees, and Leo's private school tuition. Last year alone, the amount of money I had paid out for that family had crossed the $120,000 mark. On paper, who is the legal owner of that house right now?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "The Carter Family Trust is the sole entity holding the deed," she replied. "Brandon and his wife are merely beneficiaries with residency rights, based on the voluntary consent of the trustee. They don't even own a single paving brick in the driveway." "What about his employment contract at the firm?" I continued. "Brandon is receiving a fixed retainer of $6,000 a month under the title of Strategic Advisor for your construction holding company." Sylvia read through the file. "I was the one who had created this monster. I had taught my son the wrong lesson, that money was like summer rain. All you had to do was hold out your hand. I had never taught him how to survive a drought. Now, I had to become the great drought that wipes everything out." "Start drafting the paperwork," I ordered, leaning back in my chair. "First, an eviction notice. Terminate their residency status immediately. Give them exactly 30 days as required by law to pack their bags." "Got it," Sylvia typed briskly. "What's next?" "The advisory contract. Terminate it effectively immediately. Enforce the termination without cause clause. No severance package whatsoever." "What about Leo's tuition?" she asked hesitantly. "Cancel the automatic transfers. Instead, open a brand new 529 college savings plan in the boy's name. Move the entire tuition budget into that account and lock down all access for Brandon and Brittany. That money is strictly set aside for my grandson's college education." I tapped my fingers on the desk, recalling an important detail. "That kitchen remodel loan from 2 years ago. They borrowed $40,000. Call it in. Demand immediate payment in full for both the principal and the interest." Sylvia dropped her pen on the desk. "Doug, doing this is going to bankrupt them entirely in less than a week. Execute all the documents, Sylvia, print them out, and send that eviction notice along with the debt collection order via certified courier. Use the most expensive service available. I want that delivery person to place those papers right into his hands." The printer began to hum, spitting out page after page of this legal death sentence. When everything was ready, Sylvia slid the stack of documents toward me. I picked up my pen and signed my name on every single page. My hand trembled for a split second on the final signature, a fleeting rush of a father's guilt rising to the surface. But I gritted my teeth and pressed the nib down hard. "It is done," I said, pushing the folder back to her. I stood up, feeling a strange, icy clarity spreading throughout my body. "What are you going to do now?" Sylvia asked, taking off her glasses. "I am heading home," I replied, and waiting for the noise, they sent me a text demanding peace and quiet. But I am willing to bet that the moment they receive this envelope, they will make the most horrendous noise in the world. And for the first time in my life, I will not lift a finger to stop it. The following 7 days were the strangest and most peaceful period of my entire life. For the first time in 20 long years, my phone did not ring with any sort of emergency from my children. There were no text messages whining about a broken washing machine. There were no frantic, tearful calls over a late credit card payment. There was only absolute silence, and it was truly wonderful. I woke up at 6 o'clock every morning, brewed a cup of coffee, and sat on the porch, watching the morning sunlight wash over the azalea bushes in the garden. I realized that for decades, I had unknowingly been living in a state of chronic stress. The constant anxiety over what crisis Brandon would create next had always buzzed in my head like a swarm of bees. Now, that swarm had finally flown away. To Brandon and Brittany, my silence was clearly perceived as a tactic. They were fully convinced that I was sulking. They pictured me sitting gloomily in the dark, obediently waiting for their permission to come and apologize. They had no idea that a thick stack of folders, containing an eviction notice and financial collection orders, was quietly making its way toward their front door, just like a torpedo aimed straight at the hull of a luxury cruise ship. By Friday afternoon, that false silence was finally broken. I was sitting in the living room, losing myself in a classic jazz record when the phone rang. The screen flashed with a picture of little Leo's chubby face, but the caller ID displayed underneath read Brittany. I let the phone ring 3 full times before taking my time to answer. "Hi, Dad," Brittany's voice chirped, high-pitched and strained, with a forced cheerfulness that bordered on the ridiculous. "We were getting a little worried. We haven't heard from you at all since the other day. We just wanted to call to make sure you were doing okay." "I am perfectly fine," I replied curtly, not bothering to add a single word. "That is great. Well, the main reason I am calling is that we are finalizing the plans for Leo's 8th birthday party next Saturday. This year we decided to do an outer space theme, renting out the entire Galaxy Zone play area at the mall. It is going to be amazing, Dad. All his friends from private school will be attending." "Sounds like a lot of fun," I said evenly, turning to the next page of my magazine. "Yes, the thing is, the entire deposit has to be paid off today. Since you are always the one who handles the budget for Leo's birthday every year, I just wanted to call and give you a gentle reminder to ensure you make the transfer today. The cost is around $5,000. $5,000. She had just casually asked for $5, as if she were popping over to a neighbor's house to borrow a clove of garlic. Completely brushing aside the fact that I had thrown her husband out of my house with the harshest words possible just 3 days prior. She still blindly believed that the Bank of Dad remained open for business 24/7. "I have already taken care of Leo's birthday present," I said, my voice deep yet resolute. The line went quiet. For a few seconds, I could hear the frantic clicking of a keyboard in the background. "Wait, I am looking at the joint bank account right now, and I do not see any incoming transfers," she said, her tone beginning to show her irritation. "Did you mail a check? We need to pay this by 5 p.m. today." "I did not mail any check," I answered at my own pace. Brittany's fragile patience snapped in an instant. The mask of the dutiful daughter-in-law dropped straight to the floor and shattered into pieces. "All right, listen here, Douglas. Where is the money you promised? Are you really going to punish an 8-year-old child just because you got into a fight with Brandon? That is despicable. This is just cheap revenge." "I am not punishing Leo at all," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "This morning I went down to the bank myself and deposited exactly $10,000 into a 529 college savings plan in his name." A stunned, absolutely dizzying silence swallowed the other end of the line. "Huh, what was that?" she breathed out, seemingly unable to believe her own ears. "A 529 plan," I enunciated every single word clearly. "It is locked down tight. No one has the right to withdraw a single dime from that account except for Leo himself when he turns 18. And those funds can only be used to pay for college tuition or legitimate educational expenses. But how does that help us right now?" She shrieked in desperation, her voice as sharp as a razor. "We need money to throw his birthday party. We already handed out the invitations to everyone." "Then you can pay for the party yourself," I fired back. "You are his parents. Parents are supposed to pay for birthday parties. Grandparents contribute to the long-term future. We don't have $5,000 in cash lying around." "You're crazy. You need to call the bank and cancel that ridiculous fund. Pull the money out and transfer it to us directly. Right now." "I can't do that, Brittany. It's an irrevocable trust fund. You're ruining everything." She screamed like a madwoman, completely losing her composure. "You're a selfish, dictatorial old man. I'm going to tell Leo that you were the one who ruined his birthday. When the boy is 18 and holds a degree from a prestigious university without carrying a single cent of debt, he'll know who truly cared for him," I replied. "I'm giving the phone to Brandon so he can deal with you," she threatened, panting heavily. "He should save every minute of his call plan to look for a new job," I said. "The party is officially over, Brittany." I hung up. I placed the phone face down on the table with a sense of absolute finality. That $10,000 was now safely out of reach of their bottomless greed, protecting a bright future for my grandson. The next day, Saturday, arrived with blindingly bright sunlight, the absolute perfect weather to cast a spotlight on a massive lie. Brandon and Brittany were hosting the grandest social event of the season right in the backyard of the house. Naturally, I wasn't invited. I was an invisible ghost, a silent sponsor whose existence only truly mattered when there was a bill to be paid. Thanks to the security camera system I had installed around the property when it was first built, I could monitor this entire ridiculous play through my tablet screen, though I didn't care to watch much. I already knew the script by heart. The backyard was elaborately designed and decorated to incite envy among the neighbors. Brandon stood flipping premium Wagyu beef patties on a $3,000 stainless steel Viking grill, smugly playing the role of a generous patriarch. He was completely absorbed in his royal fantasy, forgetting the naked truth. The beef he was grilling, the propane he was using, and the ground he stood on were all funded by me. Brittany was surrounded by her high society clique, wearing an expensive pristine white linen dress. Her friends were all dressed in stylish outfits, holding mimosa cocktails, casting judgmental, scrutinizing looks. I could faintly hear her boasting through the camera's microphone. "We're planning to expand this patio next spring. We want to build an outdoor kitchen with a brick pizza oven. We'll probably have to hire someone to cut down that ugly old oak tree over there to clear up the view. That was the oak tree my late wife and I had planted with our own hands 30 years ago. But to Brittany, it was just a trash-generating machine, blocking her perfect view. We're also thinking about buying a vacation home in Aspen for winter skiing," she continued, letting out a dramatic sigh. "Honestly, managing this massive estate is incredibly stressful." "So where is Brandon's dad?" a friend named Jessica curiously chimed in. "I thought he was always around at these family gatherings to help man the grill." Brittany rolled her eyes and took a sip of wine. "We had to be straight with him and tell him we needed our space. Focusing on building our nuclear family is better for everyone's mental health." "Exactly." Her friend Tiffany nodded in agreement. "Older people tend to be too overbearing. Come on, cheers to peace." The group let out a piercing laugh. They were raising their glasses to celebrate the ultimate freedom of spending my money without having to see my face. The party was reaching its peak of perfection. Everything seemed to be under control. And then the sound of reality struck. The air brakes of a FedEx delivery truck hissed sharply, cutting right through the smooth jazz playing from the outdoor speakers. A sweat-drenched delivery driver briskly walked up the cobblestone path, clutching a stiff cardboard envelope. Brandon looked up from the grill, frowning in confusion. He wasn't expecting any packages. He wiped his hands on his apron and leisurely strolled to the gate. "Brandon Carter? Express priority delivery. Needs a direct signature," the driver said casually, holding out an electronic device. Brandon scribbled his signature on the screen. The delivery man handed him the envelope, which bore a glaring red decal, "Urgent, do not bend." Then the truck started its engine and sped off, leaving a thin trail of exhaust. Brandon stood rooted to the spot, glancing at the return address, Ross & Associates, law firm. He knew full well that Sylvia Ross was my personal attorney. He probably assumed the envelope contained a massive cashier's check convinced that I had come to my senses and obediently complied after his little intimidation tactic. A smirk played on his lips. He leisurely tore off the seal. But the first piece of paper that caught his eye wasn't a check. It was a cold legal document printed on thick stock, with massive bold lettering. Notar to quit and revocation of tenancy. Brandon blinked. His brain seemed to refuse to process the phrase. His eyes quickly scanned the first paragraph. Your status as a beneficiary, with residency rights for the property located at 2445 Oak Creek Drive, is hereby officially revoked pursuant to CLE 14B. You are responsible for clearing out your personal belongings and surrendering full possession of the property within a maximum period of 30 days. All the color instantly drained from Brandon's face. His hands began to tremble so violently that the paper shook. He clumsily flipped to the second document, Notar of intent to sell property. By order of the trustee, a real estate photographer will arrive at 9 a.m. next Monday to take pictures and assess the property. Selling the house, the word hit his stomach exactly like a ton of bricks. I was selling the home he had just been boasting about expanding the patio for. He flipped down to the third document. It was a copy of the $40,000 promissory note for the kitchen renovation, stamped with a deep red seal over the text, past due payment in full required. Immediately, Brandon felt the world tilting around him. He didn't have 30 days. He didn't even have $30 in his wallet. He had maxed out all his credit cards for their trip last month. And now, he was about to become a homeless man carrying a massive debt. Brittany's shrill voice pierced through the fog of panic in his head. Honey, who is it? What's the package? Brandon jumped, frantically shoving the damp legal papers deep into the pocket of his grilling apron. He turned around, forcing out the most grotesque smile I had ever seen. Oh, just a delivery for some work documents, babe. Is it the contract for the high-rise project? Brittany asked loudly, deliberately raising her voice to show off to her wealthy friends. She was serving him a perfect lie on a silver platter. Brandon looked at the expectant faces of the guests, then at the glittering lie he had clung to for years. That's right, he said, his voice cracking slightly from the tension. The mall project urgently needs my signature to close the bid. Big business, I told you, Brittany squealed with delight, clapping her hands. We have to celebrate big tonight. Champagne is on me. Brandon nodded weakly, turning back to the grill. His hands were shaking so much, he nearly dropped the spatula onto the grass. He stared blankly at the burnt smoking burger patties. He felt as though his own life was going up in flames alongside them. The suffocating weight of the terrible secret was crushing him. He would have to continue acting and fake a smile for the next 5 hours, while the death sentence for his lavish lifestyle sat neatly in his pocket. It was past 11 p.m. when the blinding headlights of a car swept a long beam across my living room wall. Outside, a storm had just rolled in from the coast, unleashing torrential downpours that flooded the streets. But the rumbling thunder in the sky wasn't nearly as deafening as the frantic roaring of a car engine right in my driveway. I heard the screech of brakes, and then the car door slamming shut with an earth-shattering thud of fury. I closed the book I was reading and slowly took off my reading glasses. I didn't get up to answer the door immediately. I wanted them to come to me. The thunderous pounding on the door began just seconds later. It was entirely devoid of politeness, a violent assault straight against the oak wood. Open the door. Brandon's voice cracked and shrieked, competing with the howling wind. Open this damn door right now, Dad. I calmly walked to the entryway, turned on the porch light, unlocked the deadbolt, and cracked the door open. The couple looked exactly like a pathetic real-life tragedy. Brandon was soaked from head to toe, his expensive dress shirt plastered to his violently heaving chest. Brittany stood cowering behind her husband, shivering in a thin dress. Her expensive mascara had been washed away by the rain, leaving jagged black streaks down her cheeks and making her look exactly like a ghostly doll. They didn't wait for an invitation. Brandon aggressively shoved the door open, pushing me a step back to barge into the house. Brittany slipped in after him, bringing a blast of freezing, wet air. Are you insane? Brandon yelled, whirling around to face me, pointing a finger directly in my face. You've completely lost your mind. Do you realize what the hell you just did today? I calmly closed the door and carefully turned the deadbolt, shutting out the storm outside. I know exactly what I did, I replied, my voice steady as a rock. I served a valid legal notice, served. Brittany shrieked, pushing her way to the front. Her eyes were wide with a crazed glare. Some bastard delivery guy threw that envelope right in my husband's face in the middle of a high-class party. In front of all my friends, we were brutally humiliated. She was shaking, not from the cold, but from the sheer indignation of a queen who had just been dragged down from her throne. We had to kick all the guests out right after reading it. Brandon shouted, pacing back and forth in the hallway like a caged animal. We had to make up some stupid excuse about me suddenly getting sick. Do you know how humiliating that is? And then when I opened that envelope, I saw this garbage. He jammed a hand into his pocket, pulled out the soaked papers, crumpled them up, and hurled them at me with all his might. The crushed papers fluttered to the floor, a notice to quit. He spat the words out with pure disdain. You can't evict us. We're family. You can't treat us like some lowly tenants. I am treating you exactly how people treat tenants. I slowly walked over, picked up one of the papers, and smoothed it out. Because you are the worst tenants in the world, destroying property, disrespecting the landlord, and refusing to pay rent. That is our house. Brittany charged right up to my face, spit flying from her mouth. What gives you the right to call yourself the landlord, huh? We poured blood and sweat into turning that house into a home. I painted the nursery myself. I planted expensive hydrangeas in the front yard. That makes it our legal property. I stared straight into the delusional madness burning in her eyes. Brittany, I began, my deep voice carrying the heavy weight of reality. Painting a wall doesn't earn you the deed. Planting a few flowers doesn't mean you signed a mortgage agreement. You've been living there rent-free for 5 solid years. That was a massive privilege you never learned to appreciate. And today, that privilege has officially expired. You can't do this. Brandon interrupted, his voice trembling with desperation. The law will never let this happen. We have squatters' rights. We've established residency. You can't just throw a whole family out on the street over a little disagreement. He was clinging to cheap legal jargon he had probably hastily Googled or overheard from some reality TV show. I advise you to go home and read the documents very carefully, I said calmly. Sylvia Ross drafted them herself. The Carter Family Trust is the entity that owns the house. I am the sole trustee. You are merely beneficiaries with residency rights. Clause 14b states very clearly that the trustee can revoke residency rights at any time if your actions cause harm to the trust. What the hell have we done to cause harm? Brandon yelled, grabbing his head in both hands. We are working ourselves to the bone to raise your grandson. We're living a normal life. You brought me a mechanic's bill and shamelessly demanded money like you were collecting a debt. I emphasized every word, stepping forward to force him back. You insulted me in my own house. You said you wanted to be left in peace. Well, this is peace. I am protecting the trust's assets from leeches. Is all this just because Brandon asked you to pay for the transmission repair? Brittany hissed, squeezing between us. You are just a petty, vindictive old man. Fine, if you want to push it this far, we'll pay for the car repair out of our own pocket. Consider the debt settled. Now call that lawyer bitch and cancel the eviction order. Right now, she was still dreaming. She thought this was a flea market negotiation. This is no longer about the car, I said, glancing over her pathetic state. The car was just the final straw. The legal notice gave you 30 days. As of right now, you only have exactly 29 days left. Dad, are you really going to sell the house? Brandon whispered, absolute terror evident in his eyes. Yes, I replied, nodding in confirmation. The real estate photographer will be there at 9 a.m. on Monday. I demand the house be cleaned up properly for the photos. You can't sell it. That's our dream home. It's our family nest. Then you should have bought it yourself, instead of freeloading. I am the one who bought it with my hard-earned money. We added core value to the house. Brittany screamed, desperately grasping at her last straw. We paid $12,000 out of our own pockets to renovate the kitchen. Your own pockets? I raised an eyebrow, a smirk curling on my lips. Or was that the $40,000 I loaned you 2 years ago for the renovation, which you never paid back a single cent of? By the way, That debt was just called in on the paperwork, too. Payment in full demanded immediately. You're sinking to the bottom of the ocean, Brittany. Brandon stumbled back, collapsing onto my expensive sofa, burying his face in his soaking wet hands. He looked exactly like the 7-year-old boy he used to be, sitting obediently waiting for me to step in and clean up the mess he made. But I was no longer the cleanup crew. I was the demolition team. You can't do this to little Leo, he sobbed, lifting his tear-streaked face to look at me. He'll have to change schools, lose all his friends. Do you want to hurt your only grandson? The ultimate human shield called family ties was finally deployed to cover for their incompetence. Leo will be completely fine, I said steadily, letting no emotion sway me. What Leo truly needs isn't a private school paid for by his grandfather's money. What he needs is to see his biological father capable of standing on his own 2 feet like a grown man. You're destroying his life, Brittany screamed, spreading her arms wide to shield Brandon. You're jealous. You're jealous because we're young and have a happy family, while you're old, lonely, and rotting away in this house. Young and happy? You're miserably drowning in debt up to your eyeballs. I laughed out loud. I am enjoying absolute freedom, and very soon you will get a taste of freedom too. Freedom from the illusion of wealth you've always clung to. You're destroying us. Brandon suddenly looked up, his eyes bloodshot, shifting from pleading to furious. If I get evicted, I'll lose my job. You know how strictly my company does background checks. I can't have a lien or a bankruptcy record on my file. He abruptly stood up, clenching his fists tightly. Fine, he growled, gritting every word through his teeth. You want a war? You'll get a war. We're not going anywhere. We'll hire the best lawyer in the city. We will appeal. We'll drag this out in court for months, maybe even years. And most importantly, we will categorically ban you from coming within a mile of Leo. You will never see your grandson's face again. That was the only trump card he thought he had in his hand. Emotional blackmail. You can try, I said, stepping right up to him, not backing down an inch. But I have Sylvia Ross behind me. I have enough cash to fight a legal battle for 10 straight years. What about you? If you dare to restrict my visitation rights, I will personally hand your entire debt and bankruptcy file to the judge for review. Who do you think the court will grant custody to? A grandfather holding a multi-million-dollar trust fund, or a completely unemployed father? Brandon frowned in confusion. Unemployed? Are you senile? I'm not unemployed. I'm a vice president. I looked at him with sheer pity, shaking my head slightly. Check your internal company email on Monday morning, Brandon, I said, lowering my voice. I am the silent investor who pumped the capital to keep your construction firm running for the past 5 years. I've already signed the order to pull all my funding. The company will be forced to restructure their personnel on Monday morning. I didn't get you fired. I simply stopped paying them to babysit you. Utter terror was clearly etched onto his face. He seemed to have turned to stone. Dad, you fired me. Get the hell out of my house. I roared, the sound echoing off the walls, as powerful as thunder. Brittany shrieked in terror. She hastily grabbed Brandon's sleeve, frantically pulling him backward toward the door. Let's go. Stay away from him. He's really gone crazy. We'll call a lawyer in the morning. Brandon stumbled after his wife, looking back at me with eyes full of venom. I hate you, he hissed. I know, I replied coldly. I personally shoved them outside and pulled the door shut, turning the deadbolt. Click. I leaned my forehead against the freezing cold oak. My heart was pounding in my chest. I didn't want to destroy my family, but to fix a foundation that had rotted from the inside out. The engineer has to tear down the entire structure to rebuild from scratch. A heavy silence enveloped the house. They were gone, but the war had only just begun. Monday was going to be a very, very long day. Monday morning arrived as sharply and decisively as a judge's gavel. At 8:55 a.m., inside the house on Oak Creek Drive, Brittany was frantically using a rag to scrub a mottled wine stain on the marble kitchen counter. She was still wearing expensive but wrinkled silk pajamas, her hair in a messy bun. All through yesterday, she had deliberately ignored every email and voicemail from the real estate agency, deluding herself into believing that if she just pretended to close her eyes and ignore it, the photo shoot wouldn't happen. But denial has never worked to stop the wheels of reality. At exactly 9 a.m., a sleek black sedan pulled into the driveway. A young, stylish woman stepped out. It was Courtney, Brittany's bitter rival from college, who had once swallowed her pride to accept the runner-up prize when Brittany won the campus beauty queen crown. Now Courtney was a prominent real estate agent, and she held the master key to this house. Brittany froze as she looked through the glass window. She stared blankly as Courtney confidently strode up the walkway, alongside a photographer lugging an assortment of gear. The doorbell rang. Ding-dong. Brittany held her breath, backing away, determined not to answer the door. But then came the sound of the keypad clicking. Beep, 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 click. The front door swung wide open. Hello, Courtney's bright voice rang out, echoing through the hallway. Realtor here. We have a scheduled home photo shoot. Brittany lunged into the hallway like a cornered animal, clutching the lapels of her robe tightly. You can't come in here. Get out right now. This is private property. Courtney paused for a beat, sweeping her eyes over Brittany from head to toe. A look of utmost pity blossomed on her lips. Oh my God, Brittany. I had no idea you were home. Mr. Carter said the house would be completely vacant. But since you're here, could you please clean up that pile of dirty laundry tossed all over the sofa? We need to shoot a wide angle. At the same time, at the headquarters of Apex Construction Corporation downtown, Brandon was taking long strides toward the elevator bank. He hadn't slept all night, his eyes bloodshot, but he still tried to wear his best suit to project a false image of stability. I am the cash cow of this company, he mumbled under his breath to reassure himself. He walked into the 14th floor office area. The atmosphere instantly felt different. Everyone was staring down at their desks or stealing sympathetic glances at him. The entire office was eerily quiet, exactly like a funeral. Brandon reached out to push his office door. It was locked tight. He swapped his keycard over the security scanner. The indicator flashed red, access denied. Sarah, my card is malfunctioning, he snapped at his assistant. Sarah didn't get up from her chair. I can't help you, Mr. Brandon, she whispered, avoiding his gaze. Mr. Sterling, the CEO, wants to see you in the boardroom. Right now. Back at the suburban house, the photographer was casually setting up massive flashes right in the living room, tossing Brittany's elaborately arranged throw pillows aside as if they were trash. You can't just barge in and do this, Courtney, Brittany hissed through her teeth, trembling as she gripped her robe. My father-in-law is suffering a severe mental breakdown. We are calling the police and our lawyer right now. Courtney leisurely opened her leather binder, pulling out a document with a glaring red seal. I am holding a legal listing agreement, signed by Mr. Douglas Carter, and a copy of the court-stamped eviction order. Honestly, this is so embarrassing, Britt. You were always running your mouth bragging about my kitchen, my living room. But it turns out you were just a ragged squatter. You're about to be packed up and thrown out on the street. It's ours. Brittany collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably like a child. It used to be yours, Courtney smirked, correcting her. The contract explicitly states selling a vacant home for immediate possession. I have an ultra-wealthy investor coming to view the house in 20 minutes. You could get on your knees and beg him to let you rent the house back, but with your combined credit scores right now, you'd definitely fail the background check. Brittany completely broke down. Courtney held all the power. Brittany was nothing more than a pathetic woman in her pajamas, crying in the middle of a house about to be sold right out from under her. In the 14th floor boardroom, the air conditioner hummed smoothly, but beads of sweat were pouring down Brandon's forehead like rain. Mr. Sterling, the powerful CEO of the corporation, sat at the head of the table, his hands clasped on the glass surface. Take a seat, Brandon. Sterling's cold voice rang out. We are undergoing a massive corporate restructuring. We will be liquidating the vice president position. Liquidating? What do you mean? I am the face of this corporation. I bring in the contracts. Brandon jumped up in shock. You are only the face of one specific funding source. Sterling slid an emergency withdrawal notice across the table toward him. Our biggest silent investor has officially pulled all his capital due to a loss of confidence in your management abilities. Brandon tremblingly turned the page to look at the signature at the bottom corner. Douglas Carter. He stared blankly at the familiar name. My dad is the silent investor? Exactly, Sterling nodded, showing zero sympathy. He informed us that the trial run of your capabilities is over. He pulled his funding. The corporation can no longer shoulder your sky-high salary or the budget for your puppet department. But I'm great at my job. Everyone knows I'm great. Let's be honest, Brandon, you're only great at spending money. All the technical work, the quantity surveying, and contract negotiations were handled entirely by your subordinates. You were just a smokescreen funded by a rich daddy to make the team look good. And now his check has bounced. The boardroom door swung open. Two burly security guards walked in, placing a tiny cardboard box containing his few personal knickknacks on the table. His glorious 5-year fake career was crumpled up into a box that didn't even weigh 5 pounds. You can't do this. I need to call my dad. He will explain. Please escort Mr. Carter out of the building. Sterling signaled to security. The guard violently yanked the employee keycard right off his belt. He was completely cut off. The walk from the boardroom to the elevator felt as long as a century. Every employee stopped what they were doing, staring and whispering. The arrogant prince had finally been publicly dethroned. The elevator ride down took exactly 30 seconds to free fall, from the glamorous 14th floor into the muddy reality of the streets. He was tossed out onto the sidewalk under the drizzling rain. The dirty rainwater soaked his expensive suit. He stood alone at the busy intersection, clutching the cardboard box, and pulled out his phone to dial my number. I was sitting in the kitchen sipping coffee when I saw Brandon flashing on the screen. I didn't answer. A minute later, Brittany's number popped up. I didn't pick up either. Their two perfect worlds had shattered simultaneously, exactly as calculated by a structural engineer. I picked up a pen, crossing 2 items off my to-do list. Surgically removing a tumor always involves blood and pain. I turned the ringer off entirely, leaned back in my chair, and went back to reading my book. Everything was going exactly according to the blueprint. A few days later, a legal mediation meeting took place in attorney Sylvia Ross's office on the 42nd floor. The air in the conference room felt suffocating and highly intimidating. The air conditioning emitted a low hum. The long mahogany table was polished like a mirror, reflecting the distorted faces of those sitting around it. On one side of the table sat my son, Brandon, and his wife, Brittany. They looked as if they had aged a decade in a mere 48 hours. Brandon wore a rumpled suit. He didn't dare look me in the eye, keeping his gaze glued to his tightly clenched hands resting on the table, his knuckles white from the pressure. Brittany was wearing a pair of massive sunglasses even though we were indoors. She sat with her arms crossed, radiating an aura that was a mix of sheer outrage and absolute terror. Sitting next to them was their lawyer, Mr. Henderson. He was a bottom-feeding attorney who set up offices in rundown strip malls, specializing in urging clients to file personal injury lawsuits. The fact that they had to hire a guy like him revealed everything I needed to know about my son's current depleted financial state. On the other side of the table sat Sylvia Ross and myself. Sylvia looked like an embodiment of lethal elegance. She placed a thick black binder in front of her. Henderson cleared his throat, trying to project confidence to open the floor. Let's not waste each other's time anymore. My clients are victims of a sudden and malicious eviction scheme. We will be claiming equitable interest. My clients have lived in that house for the past 5 years. They poured blood, sweat, and tears into it. You cannot simply throw them out on the street. Sylvia didn't blink. She didn't look at Henderson. She looked directly at Brandon. Blood, sweat, and tears, she repeated slowly. A very poetic phrase, Attorney Henderson. But in a courtroom, we prefer to see receipts. She flipped open the black binder. The snap of the metal rings echoed through the room like the racking of a shotgun. Brittany flinched and took off her sunglasses. We renovated the kitchen. She blurted out loudly, her voice shrill. We installed marble countertops. We landscaped the garden ourselves. Those things make us co-owners. Let's talk about value. Sylvia ran her finger down a column of numbers. And let's talk about who paid for that value. Exhibit A. This is the comprehensive ledger listing all household expenditures for the property on Oak Creek Drive over the last 60 months. Her voice droned on evenly, completely devoid of emotion. Mortgage payments, $5, $200 a month. Property taxes, $12 a year. Homeowners insurance, $18. Maintenance and repairs. Lawn mowing, pool cleaning. All paid by Douglas Carter. You mentioned the garden, didn't you, Brittany? The $3,000 invoice for those hydrangeas also bears Douglas Carter's signature. You didn't plant them. You simply pointed at a catalog and my client footed the bill. Brittany's face flushed deep red. But I designed it. And the kitchen, we spent $12,000 from our joint account to install those marble countertops. Sylvia pulled out the promissory note stamped with a bright red past due. 2 weeks before the kitchen renovation began, Mr. Carter transferred $40,000 into your joint account as a home improvement loan. You took $12,000 of my client's money to install stone countertops in his own house. You pocketed the remaining $28,000 to blow on personal lifestyle expenses. And you never paid back a single cent. That is not a property contribution, Brittany. That is embezzlement. Henderson wiped the sweat from his brow. He was beginning to realize he had just walked into a slaughterhouse. You're evicting a family with a young child. Any judge will only see a grandfather acting out of malicious spite. I leaned forward, resting both hands on the table. Expectations? That is the crux of the problem, isn't it? You people always expand. You think you are entitled to these privileges. Brandon looked up at me, his eyes full of pleading. Dad, stop, please. We get it. You proved your point. We're drowning. I lost my job. Just let us stay a few more months until I can find a new job. Please, for Leo. For a split second, I felt a twinge of pain in my chest. But then, I remembered that absurd bill demanding money for a transmission repair. Sylvia cut him off coldly. We are not here to discuss extending a lease. We are here to discuss a counterclaim. Unjust enrichment. She pulled out one final spreadsheet. This one had only one massive number, circled in red ink at the very bottom. Since you are claiming you are tenants with legal rights, we will retroactively collect usage fees. The fair market rental value for that home is $3,000 a month. 60 months equals $180. Add the $40,000 renovation loan. Add the legal fees. The total debt you currently owe the trust is $235. $400. The room fell into a dead silence. Over $235,000. That was a life sentence for an unemployed couple. Brittany clutched her chest, gasping for air. We'll have to declare bankruptcy. Then I advise you to accept our settlement offer. Sylvia slid a thin piece of paper across the table. A surrender and release agreement first. Vacate the property within 7 days. Second, surrender the house in pristine condition. Third, sign a waiver foregoing all financial claims or residency rights. In exchange, Mr. Carter will forgive the entire $235,400 debt. You will walk away from that house with a clean credit score. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp as knives. But if you file a motion to stay the eviction, we will pull the deal. We will collect the full amount. We will seek an order to garnish your future wages for the next 20 years. Do you want a fresh start, Brandon? Or do you want to become a slave to your own arrogance? Brandon tremblingly reached out for the pen. He looked at me, whispering one final, Dad, hoping I would save him. I didn't blink. Sign it, Brandon. It's going to be the most expensive signature you ever put to paper, but it's a lot cheaper than the alternatives. He signed. Brittany signed next, tears streaming down onto the paper. They completely surrendered. When the conference room door closed, Sylvia ripped the spreadsheet showing the debt figure right down the middle. You know we could never collect that rent without a written lease agreement, right? That was just a bluff, I know. I smiled, but they didn't. I walked out of the office. The air was fresh. For the first time in my entire life, I was completely free. The breakdown of my son's marriage didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened right on the driveway of the house on Oak Creek, exactly 48 hours after they signed the settlement agreement. For 5 years, Brandon and Brittany had been bound together by a mutual love, the love of spending my money. But when the credit line was cut off, that partnership was instantly dissolved. She screamed and cursed that Brandon had deceived her. She accused him of being a pathetic loser fired by his own father. She didn't mourn the loss of the house or the trauma to her son. She only mourned her illusory social status. By Thursday, Brittany had called her parents. She crammed everything she could sell for cash into her personal car. The silverware, the artwork, the jewelry. She cleaned out everything and only packed a selfish survival kit for herself, not bothering to take any of Brandon's belongings. Brandon stood by the trunk of her car, begging her, asking how they could weather the storm together. She let out a cold, sharp laugh. Together. You are drowning. I will never let you drag me down with you. You have nothing, you're a sinking ship. She slammed the gas pedal and backed out of the driveway, leaving behind scorched black tire marks. She filed for divorce the very next morning, with the sole purpose of extracting child support, the only income Brandon could be forced to pay from his unemployment checks. At exactly 12:00 p.m. on Monday, strictly obeying orders, Brandon placed the set of keys on the kitchen counter and walked out of the house on Oak Creek Drive. No landlord would approve his rental application, because he was unemployed. He was forced to rent a room at the rundown Starlight Motel on the edge of town. He locked himself in that room for days on end, going through privilege withdrawals, holding his breath waiting for me to rescue him. But I never came. The final blow struck on Tuesday night. His luxury SUV was towed by the bank for missed payments. Brandon ran out into the parking lot in his underwear, screaming in the middle of the filthy asphalt, staring as the last cord connecting him to the civilized world was dragged away. That night he hit rock bottom. He called me. I saw the incoming call, but I let it ring. If I saved him now, he would never learn how to save himself. And the next morning, he did something I completely didn't expect. Brandon wore the only clean suit he had left, walking 3 miles to the Home Depot hardware store. He walked straight to the manager's desk. He didn't ask for an executive position. He looked the manager straight in the eye and said, "I need a job. I will haul lumber, I will mix paint, I will mop the floors, I just need to work." It was a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after the eviction order was executed. Brandon had returned to my house. He walked from the bus stop, looking noticeably thinner, wearing a pair of worn-out jeans. "Hey Dad," he started, his voice raspy. "I just wanted to drop by, to say I'm sorry. Not about the money, but about the way I treated you. I was too arrogant. You were right about everything." I stared at him. For the first time, I didn't see manipulation, only absolute exhaustion and fear. "I accept your apology," I said gently. "Thank you, Dad," he continued rapidly. "Everything has been hell. Brittany's gone. The lawyers are eating me alive. I'm trying really hard, but I just need a little help to get back on my feet. I need a deposit to rent an apartment, right now, just $2,000. I can't get a decent job without a permanent address. You loan me that money. I swear I will pay you back in full." Every instinct in my body screamed at me to pull out my checkbook and patch up all his pain. $2,000 was nothing, but then I remembered a core principle. If you use cheap lumber to build the foundation, the entire structure will collapse. I had played the role of that cheap wood for the past 30 years. Now I had to become steel. I pulled out an envelope. Brandon's eyes were glued to it, thinking it was a check. He breathed a sigh of relief, but when he tore open the paper, it wasn't a check. It was a job application for a heavy machinery stevedore position at the commercial docks, clipped to Foreman Miller's business card. "What is this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "It's a job," I replied. "Extremely hard labor. You'll be hauling steel cables in the rain. The pay is $18 an hour, $18. He was horrified. "Dad, I used to make a 6-figure salary. I came here to borrow money." "Giving you money isn't helping you, Brandon. Money is just morphine that numbs the pain, but it doesn't cure the disease. Your disease is that you always delude yourself into thinking you are too high class to sweat. If you take this job, if you learn the feeling of sheer exhaustion from hard labor, you might have a chance of becoming a real man." He crumpled the paper, choking back a sob. "You are so cruel. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do," I choked out. "Miller will be waiting for you at 5 a.m. tomorrow. It's up to you. Throw that paper in the trash, or get on the bus and go to work." I turned my back and walked into the house. I heard his footsteps fading away. A few hours later, I received a text from Sylvia. He called Miller. "He starts tomorrow." I let out a long sigh, casting my gaze out at the sunset. He had accepted the fishing rod. I picked up my phone and called the 529 plan, authorizing the monthly deposits for Leo. Then, I ordered a large bouquet of flowers sent to Brittany's parents' house, with a card that simply read, "For Leo." I am not the villain. I'm not the hero either. I am just a father who finally understood the fragile boundary between love and indulgence. Sometimes, true love is a stone wall blocking the doorway and saying, "No." This decision shattered the illusion of a happy family, but I bought back my son's dignity. And I bought peace for myself. Tomorrow, I will send this bookshelf to Leo. Then, I'll drive out to the coast and watch the waves crash violently against the cliffs. Life is inherently harsh. It always finds a way to break us all, but it's in those broken moments that we discover our true nature. I am Douglas Carter. I am a builder, and today I just laid the first brick for a foundation that I firmly believe will stand forever. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to practice this kind of tough love, let me know in the comments below. Goodbye, and see you in the next stories.